This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. In human psychology, 3 seems to be a magic number for us when it comes to confirming data or really confirming our beliefs about certain players or things. Like if we see something one time, a lot of us are smart enough to understand that we only saw it one time. That might not be how it happens every time. Now, if we see it 2 times, we're going to start like raising our eyebrows and asking questions about if that's what the case is going to be. A 3rd time, though, once you see it a 3rd time, kind of set. And see, the reason I'm talking about 3 being a magic number is if you walk back with me from 2022, Cleveland Browns started 2 quarterbacks, Jacoby Brissett during Watson's suspension, and then Deshaun Watson. And you can make the argument that Jacoby Brissett outperformed Deshaun Watson when Jacoby Brissett was out there. Not saying which part that is true, but the argument was a feasible argument to make. It wasn't a ridiculous argument to make that Jacoby Brissett was as effective or more effective than Deshaun Watson. Also, one quarterback threw for 300 yards that season. It was not Deshaun Watson. It was Jacoby Brissett. Then you get to 2023, and this is where it gets a little bit more dicey, right? Because it wasn't clear cut in 2023 like it is in 2024. But in 2023, Deshaun Watson did not throw for 300 yards. Now, again, to be fair to Deshaun Watson here, he threw for 297 versus the Titans, which is basically 300 yards once you add his rushing totals in. But 297 yards, but Joe Flacco throws for 300 yards multiple times that same season. And again, whether the argument is true or not, or whether you want to get back in that whole thing, there is an argument that can be made that is credible. Not saying it's true, but it's credible about if Watson is better than Joe Flacco or if Joe Flacco is better than Watson. It was debatable. Again, for a guy that you wanted to be a franchise quarterback, this is the 2nd time that you're debating whether he was better than the replacement guy that you had in there. And then you get to 2024. And Watson is notably worse than he was in 2023 in almost every metric. He had a significant fall off. It seemed like the throwing shoulder surgery affected him significantly. And then he tears his Achilles, and then by the time he comes back, he's going to be over 30. So it was a long shot that he was going to get another real chance to be the starter for the Browns. Like maybe if people get hurt and Watson is available, they might start him. But like as far as the Browns going into the season, trying to build around Deshaun Watson, I don't think that's going to be the case anymore. And then this happened, and I think it was the nail in the coffin because it's the 3rd time it's happened. Jameis Winston is going to be the quarterback who's thrown for over 300 yards, and Deshaun Watson is going to be the quarterback who didn't even throw over 200. Jameis Winston plays, and the offense looks a lot smoother. Deshaun Watson's offense never looked that smooth. It's the 3rd time we're making that argument. And again, the 3rd time you can argue, and you can already make this argument with Jameis because what he's done in one drive in one game has been statistically as significant as pretty much what Watson has done for the whole first part of the season. You can make the argument that Jameis Winston probably a better quarterback at this point than Deshaun Watson. And it's a very credible argument to make. 3rd time, you can make that argument. And see, the first time that happened, we convinced ourselves that it was the layoff. And I think that was a fair thing to do. He missed 700 days. It was the layoff. It may be the day that I don't think the data was saying what it said. I think he was just rusty. I think that was fair. I think that was a very fair place to be at. In 2023, I thought that Watson played well according to the tape. And then you look at some of the numbers, what he was doing as a runner and all that. And you're like, you can make the argument he was playing good football. The The point differential that he had was like plus 63. That was up there with Kansas City, who won the Super Bowl that year. So again, the argument can be made that, hey, Watson wasn't playing spectacular in 2023, but he was playing really good high margin football. And, Joe Flacco, while he was a bit more entertaining and while the offense did look smoother while he was out there, you can make the argument that Deshaun played football that was easier to win with. And the win-loss record reflected that with Deshaun Watson in 2023. 2024, not only is this the third time it's happening, it's probably the least excusable time that it's happened because Deshaun Watson had a whole offseason. He got an offensive coordinator that's here so he can be more comfortable. And the whole time he's out there, he's not throwing for 200. People are blaming the offensive coordinator and blaming Ken Dorsey for everything that's going wrong. And the week that he does not play and Ken Dorsey gets more power because he's the play caller now, the offense looks better than it's ever been. So not only is the dude who's not you throwing for 300 yards again, but the dude that everybody was blaming for your failure in 2024, right? The big talking point with Deshaun was, okay, he was fine in 2023. He's bad in 2024. Maybe it's not a physical fall off. Maybe it's just Ken Dorsey stinking it up. He did get fired in Buffalo. That was like the best argument that I think the pro Watson side of this had going into this game. But then Ken Dorsey gets the play sheet. He gets to call the plays. So you can argue more influence over the offense than he had. And not only does the offense look better, you get the best quarterback performance you've gotten all year by far. This is an offense that struggled to score over 20 points. They almost put up 30 on the Baltimore Ravens. This is a team that lost at home to the New York Giants that could not contain Daniel Jones or outscore Daniel Jones. It's a team that lost to the Raiders. And then they just beat the Baltimore Ravens in the middle of a 5-game win streak. Now, there's some other questions to ask about this victory. Like once we're done being happy about it, like, how much anger are we going to hold towards management for what appears to be holding the team back, right? If Jameis continues to play like this, I mean, that's the only determination you can make is that the team decided to hold the team hostage for the hope that Deshaun Watson would start playing quarterback a little bit better. Somebody's got to answer for that because you don't want to be in a situation where something like this happens again. And maybe the argument there for someone is that it's not a situation that's likely to pop up again, but still, I would be a lot more comfortable if I understood why it was that a team made this decision, because the assumptions that are out there to be made about why the Browns continued to go with Watson just aren't sufficient to me, right? Oh, he's expensive. Oh, he has this contract. I thought it was worth it to bench him like in week 5 or 6. So I don't get why they continued it. I don't get why they continued to double down on this in the weeks leading up to the Watson injury, going as far to tell us that that Deshaun Watson gave you the best chance to win. Also going as far as to demote Jameis Winston to third string, which seems like an even more questionable decision at this point, because like, it's tough to convince me that he did not look better than Deshaun Watson in practice. It is almost impossible to convince me that he did not look better than DTR in practice. Like, there's no way you're going to convince me that Jameis looked worse than DTR in practice. Like, I want to see that footage if that's the case, because Jameis is quite clearly more advanced than both of those quarterbacks, quite frankly, this year. So it's something that we do have to eventually talk about. And I think the more the Browns win, the more it's going to be something that lingers back there, because it'd be one thing if they made the decision to bench Deshaun and then play Jameis and it works out. It's another thing when you're kind of forced into that decision and it works out, and it was something that people wanted you to do before you were forced to do that, right? Like, it's kind of you kind of want to make sure that the lesson was learned, or at least the proper lesson was learned, because there is a part of me that fears that they're going to naively try to do the whole Watson thing again next year. Now, I highly doubt that's going to be the case. And the reason I doubt that's going to be the case is because the Browns are numbers people at the end of the day. And the numbers are going to tell them that this is a 30-year-old quarterback who had a significant downturn in production in 2024, who also is coming off a throwing shoulder injury in 2023 and a Achilles injury in 2024 while being 30 plus. Those numbers, that set of circumstances, usually a team that is as number based as the Cleveland Browns are, or decision makers who are as number based as the Cleveland Browns are, given the lack of production that Deshaun has had over the last few years, they would see the light and cut bait with that based on the numbers alone here. So I don't expect that they're going to continue on with Watson, but I do hope that they understand that they did make a mistake by continuing to play Deshaun Watson. Because if you benched him earlier, I think this team is going to be in a much more competitive place. And that's going to be one of the things we're going to wonder about, because what if this team does go on a legitimate run here and maybe they finish 8-9 or 9-8, but they missed the playoffs by a game? You're going to wonder, man, if he played against the Commanders, could they have won that game? If he played versus the Philadelphia Eagles, could they have won that game? If he played versus the Cincinnati Bengals, could he have won that game? Because I think there's a reasonable case to make for all three of those games that if Jameis Winston played, you probably could have won all three of those games. Definitely the Philadelphia and Cincinnati games. So that is something that's going to be interesting as this season goes on. The more success they have with Jameis Winston, the more they're going to open themselves up to, I don't think it's criticism, but it is a level of scrutiny that will require some kind of repentance on why they did what they did, or explanation on why they continued to do what they did. Now, again, I think the explanation that people are going to go with at the end of the day, because it's convenient, is I'll just blame Jimmy, right? Like, I think that's the easy explanation to go to. I don't know if me personally, I buy that explanation, because it doesn't seem like that's what's going on here. So I really would like to know if they learned a lesson from this whole thing as the season goes on, and if this continues to go like this week went for the Browns. It's possible that Jameis could be a disaster for the rest of the season and this doesn't end up being a larger conversation. But it also seems possible that Jameis can play well, at least Jacoby Brissett well, or at least to a point to where you could tell that the team is much better with him at quarterback than they were with Deshaun Watson. And maybe they're not going to be a perfect team for the rest of the year, but they were a team that could have had a chance if they would have made a move a little bit sooner. Here's another layer I want to add to this, right? Because we're just kind of talking about the immediate impact now, but the Browns, again, if they move on from Watson, which I think this is pretty much nail in the coffin, they're going to do it. What needs to be thought about the next guy? And it's interesting when you look at Kevin and you look at the success he's had as a Cleveland Browns head coach, and the success that the offenses that he has a fingerprint on, which he has fingerprints in every offense that the Cleveland Browns have ran since 2020. He seems to be successful with the brand of quarterback that we don't seem to be making much of, right, in 2024, right? The Jameis Winstons, the Joe Flaccos of the world, the Jacoby Brissetts of the world, and even to some extent the Baker Mayfields of the world, they're not really coming off the assembly line anymore in the way that they used to in the 2010s, right? Pocket passing is not the norm in college football. And I think a big question for the Browns going forward is, how do you identify people who can have success with what Kevin does and what Kevin has proven to do very well, what you can integrate with what Ken Dorsey does really well in modern college football in order to find your guy? That's the big question, because I don't think the Browns have had a great answer for that question, right? Like, I don't think they have done a great job of identifying how to translate what they like from traditional, 2010s and earlier type quarterback prospects to what the college game is giving you today, where these guys are going to come from a majority spread system, and these guys are going to be used to being able to play out of structure, right? Like, how do you identify that? I think that's the next big task for this team, because it's fun that we can have success with the Jacoby Brissett and a Jameis Winston and an insert older, big arm, pocket passing quarterback here. But the truth is that there's not a lot of those guys coming out of college. And if you're the Browns, you want to get a franchise quarterback and you want to get a young quarterback in order to build a team that's good enough to win a Super Bowl. And in order to do that, you got to figure out how to identify what works with your offense in what's going on now with college football. I think that's going to be the next big step for the Cleveland Browns this offseason, and something that I hope Kevin and Andrew Berry are thinking about every day, because they have not been good at it. While I'm going to enjoy the victory Monday, and while I'm going to enjoy the fact that the Browns won, I can't help but wonder about how this will continue to be received if it continues to go in this direction for the Browns and Jameis Winston. On one hand, you can give Kevin a lot of credit for stepping aside and giving Ken Dorsey the play calling sheet, because he seems to have a better feel for how Jameis Winston wants to attack. Because again, I think that makes sense. Kevin Stefanski is a more naturally conservative play caller. Ken Dorsey is a much more aggressive play caller, right? Much more downfield throwing. So it makes sense that you would give him the keys while Jameis Winston is out there, or just give him the keys when you're looking to get more downfield throwing in your offense, right? And it's just putting me in this awkward place where, like, what do I do if I think you did a pretty good job with everything that you're responsible for, except for this one very, very critical and consequential decision? That's kind of the bind that Stefanski has me in right now. And it's just something I'm thinking about and something I wanted to kind of share. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.